So the sound there of Ayanda Gia coming through with The Sun, just ushering us into the last hour of the show. And this is where we're going to go into Africa and look at developments here on the continent. And this morning, looking specifically at the debt crisis and the currency devaluation here on the continent. We often hear that Africa is grappling with a dual economic challenge, a mounting debt crisis, and also this widespread currency devaluation that becomes a cause for concern. So these issues are not new, but have intensified in recent years, we're told, due to a combination of issues, a number of external shocks that would play themselves out. There are also issues around weaknesses structurally that would play themselves out, but also the global economic dynamics. Right now, we're navigating the Trump tariffs and this, tariff war that is playing itself out, the Russia-Ukraine war that is playing itself out, and all of these would have somewhat of an implication on us as emerging economies. So this morning, we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at the key factors contributing to the crisis here, but also what we can do to, push back against the issue of currency devaluation, the causes and the consequences. You find us live on 0861 987 000. There on X, we go by at PowerFM 987 at Katlego Legodi _ Elvis, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Katlego. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us your time and just helping us to go into Africa this morning. We see somewhat of a bleak picture that would be painted around emerging economies on the continent and the debt crisis. I mean, this becomes a big one as we see, the continent really being dependent here, as we see the begging bowl just continue to move from one country to the next. And it doesn't look like we are arresting this challenge right now. Let's talk about it. Where do we find ourselves right now, especially around this issue of the debt crisis?
Thank you very much, Katlego. I think we need to critically and frankly have a conversation about these two critical issues that are tightly connected in Africa. The debt crisis and currency devaluation, and how these two critical monitors are linked on corruption, poor governance, and other shocks which we are seeing. We often hear that Africa's debt challenges are due to external shocks. We heard about the COVID-19 pandemic. We heard about the global interest rate hikes. We have heard about falling commodity prices. We have heard about geopolitical conflicts, the war in Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East. And yes, those shocks matter, Katlego. But they are only part of the picture. I think as Africa is concerned, we need to be able to diagnose the problem correctly so that we'll be able to come up with a clear prescription on what is happening in Africa.
Let's go there and diagnose it and kind of get a sense of how we find ourselves in the receiving end here, because even according to the World Bank, statistics would tell us that things would be bleak here on the continent. So over half of low-income countries in the sub-Saharan Africa are either in debt, they're in distress, or even at high risk of being in debt or being distressed here. And this then would move into the GDPs of some of these economies as well. How do we find ourselves here?
So the outside of the shocks, which we have been praised, Katlego, it is critically important that the main part of this problem is homegrown. Fiscal mismanagement by most African governments, misuse of borrowed funds, weak oversight within our institutions. In some cases, outright theft is happening. There's corruption, money laundering in most African countries. These governance failures can make bad situations much worse, leaving Africans and African nations with heavy debts, leaving Africa and Africans with weak currencies and economic starting survival mode. But Katlego, when we talk about debt in Africa, we are not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet. We are talking about obligations, often in US dollars or euros, that must be repaid regardless of how economies or how our economies perform. Now we are stuck as African countries. Our nations mainly are not performing. And the problem is that most African countries earn foreign currency mainly from commodity exports. If prices fall or production is disrupted, those inflows shrink. And there is a dangerous loop. When a currency loses value, the local currency cost of repaying foreign debt dramatically, rises. And it's a tragedy. But
it does become a trap.
The question to throw in is the governance. We need to take in effect the governance sector when we are talking about it's part of our diagnosis. Now, we need to be clear. External shocks hit everyone the world over. But the governance determines how well a country can absorb those shocks. So the issue of governance is critically important in dealing with debt. When a country borrows for infrastructure and invests wisely, the debt can be repaid through increased productivity and cost. But when the money is wasted, stolen, mismanaged, and all those things, all that is left is debt. And the other thing is weak institutions. We have that problem of weak institutions in Africa. Lack of transparency, political patronage, and corruption make it possible for billions and billions in borrowed funds to vanish without building anything meaningful for the African citizens.
I want to zoom into the issue.
All these issues undermines investor confidence and makes creditors worry, in pushing interest rates higher for future borrowing. So that is the problem we are having. We have countries. I just want to give you as a case study, as an example. We have a country like Ghana. Ghana is often cited as a model for democracy in Africa. But even their fiscal discipline itself and corruption has contributed to severe debt crisis beyond external shocks. Inflated procurement contracts, we see them fly even here in South Africa. Recently, there was an explosion from the security sector in South Africa concerning all these things: inflated procurement, unnecessary spending, questionable, deals. These are the main problems which is affecting us in Africa.
And it becomes a cause for concern because over time we even hear that there's excessive borrowing. That many countries would borrow heavily here from external creditors. And this becomes a challenge as well because even in these borrowings, there's that lack of transparency. That becomes a challenge when we don't know the nitty-gritties, the finer details and the expectations, the time frames, the terms of return to this investment, where these deals are concerned. There's always somewhat of secrecy that they're shrouded in over time. Is it intentional when you look at it here, or then there could be a threat to maybe national security, for instance, which is why then we don't get to hear what the conditions of some of these loans would be, but we hear that money is given and maybe they'll say it's for energy development, for instance, but we don't understand how the agreement in terms of the repayment, because like you say, it may compromise even our kids here in the future.
Yes, Katlego. I think that is the tragedy. It is a tragedy of a major proportion. But Katlego, the problem, as I'm saying, is squarely on our leadership in Africa. Why? I just want to take you back a bit. Africa is rich with resources, with energy. If we try to harness power from the sun, we can harness power that can save us for generations. If we have, clear climate, we have everything that we can think we need as a continent. But the problem squarely is on leadership. You mentioned critically that there's a lot of secrecy in borrowing That is the problem of our leadership in Africa. And that's why we are grappling with this crisis only in Africa. I want to give you a case study of Mozambique. Remember, if you recall very well, in 2016, there was a hidden dirty scandal in Mozambique. Perhaps the most blatant example of governance failure, in 2016. $2 billion in secret loans were taken out without parliamentary approval. Much of it lost to corruption. When the loans of this side, just taken, it was, investor confidence, the idea that people are coming in to work and invest in the country will be doing that. But the problem is that these people do this deal so that they will leave a loophole for them to loot. They will leave a loophole for them to take cash or to, benefit from this borrowing, outside national development. And they put that thing under, the guise of national security that we cannot give you. But an independent country, an independent, an impartial government must, put into clear this the transparency in borrowing. All loan agreements should be put and should be made public, because remember, Katlego said it's the next generations which are going to inherit the same debt. And there's going to be a vicious cycle of these problems we are facing today, the problems in inflation, the problems of unemployment, because the government will be trying to servicing the debt which the old generation has left. So it is critically important that if the government are involved or the government is involved in these, borrowings, it is critically important that they come out clear and make it clear to the people, so that the people who understand and know what is happening. And we have some positive examples, Katlego. Not every story is negative. Kenya showed this in 2024, that proactive debt management issuing, is important. When they were issuing bonds and buying backward notes, it helps in creating and restore confidence and strengthen the currency. We have seen the same in Egypt. Egypt with the decision in the same year in 2024 to float the pound and unify exchange rates, close the gap with the black market, and improve foreign exchange availability, despite the initial shocks. So this example proves that with the great policies, honest leadership, and sober and clear leadership, recovery is possible. Until we deal with these things, Katlego, until we deal with the issue of transparency in borrowing, until we deal with the issue of independent audit in borrowing, until we deal with the strong anti-corruption agencies and strong independent institutions in Africa, until we do the legal debt limit, borrowing should be kept, Katlego. It's not about borrowing after borrowing after borrowing after borrowing. Borrowing should be kept. But how can borrowing can be kept when the government is doing it silently, when the government is doing it secretly? There is no parameters that the people should voice out to say we have borrowed enough. I cannot come to your house, Katlego, each and every month coming to you and borrow. Give me 1,000 rands. Next month, the following week, give me 1,000. That borrowing, a framework must be kept, must have a limitation to say, no, enough is enough. We need to repay before we borrow again, because this, debt will continue to grow and will affect the production in our country. If the production in our country is affected, if manufacturing in our country is affected, it also devalues our currency.
I want to also just look at, I'm glad that you gave us at least the positives here in Kenya, that there is, a possibility. We can do it, and again, I wanted to ask you to say, how do we start, turning that corner? How do we start rethinking our approaches here? Does it start with our domestic budgets and how we navigate our finances so that we don't go to borrow? That fiscal control, even from home, the domestic fiscal control, how do we actually start in any way doing doing things, in line with how then we want to safeguard even the sovereignty of our nations here? And is it possible for these countries to turn the corner, or most of them would find themselves knee deep in this debt? Hence, we categorize it as a crisis here, that it would be difficult for them to even start getting out of some of these spaces.
Katlego, it's not too late. Africa's debt and current troubles are partly driven by, as we mentioned, global factors. But, we need to start to deal, for us to solve this crisis, to solve this problem. The first thing is to identify and address and call it a problem, because it is a crisis. Katlego, we need to deal with our domestic, budgets. Let's have this economic principle that, Katlego, eat what you kill, eat what you have. Let's normalize and have this fiscal discipline that as a nation, we need to eat what we have. We need to kill. We need to eat what you kill. You don't expect to eat an elephant while you've managed to capture just a rat or a rabbit. Eat a rabbit because that's what you can afford. That is what you have. If we can have that discipline as African nation, that if we have a rat, let's try to play around our domestic budgets so that we'll be able to address the problems we're having until we sink into that. The problem comes when, if I'm used to eat what I have in my house, if I go to the bank and as I come to your house and start to borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow, we need to live within our means as a nation. African countries must live and must learn to manage their own, local, domestic, budgets. But how can that be done? That is where we need independent institutions that fights corruption, because the problem, the reason why our domestic budgets are not, doing anything is because of the porous gaps which are left there, which allows these people to come in and steal, which allows these people, to misuse these funds. So we need to have independent institutions. We need to have these, corruption agencies which are independent. And one of the critical things which is needed also, Katlego, is a political will. There must be a political will that we need to make this work. We need to live within our means as a nation, so that we will not be, caught in this a cycle of borrowing and living in debt. So it is critically important that we do this. And then let's have, even outside that, if you are borrowing, as I mentioned, let's have with the help of our domestic, budget, let's have legal debt limits. Let's have it. Borrowing should be kept. It must be debated in Parliament. Parliament approval. It is critically important that the people, those who are in Parliament, those who are representing people,
it needs to get there. Yeah.
And the other things, let's have conditional debt relief. Let's have reforms, financial reforms, economic reforms, so that creditors should tie debt restructuring, Katlego, in measurable governance, governance reforms. The other problem, Katlego, is that you mentioned the issue of our sovereignty and integrity, our national security. How can you be secure when you are borrowing someone? You are not secure. You are exposed if you are borrowing someone. So we need, if you want to to respect our sovereignty, let's deal with our domestic, budgets. Let's shape them. Let's fight corruption. Let's improve, transparency in whatever we're doing, so that we have, the integrity which and the respect which we require as African, nation. So it is possible, Katlego, that we stop borrowing, we stop going out there with the begging bowels to say we want to beg. Because when we are begging and whatever which is coming in Africa, it comes with conditions. You are not just giving me for free. The debt comes with conditions. We will be, for the next 50 years to come, our kids will be paying the same debt on the same basis. We are selling that which is important to us as Africans, our identity. It goes with that debt.
It's a bit of a concern, when you look at it, because of that whole compromise that comes and goes into the future generations. It does then even boggles the mind to think that this could be the possibility in the scenario that can play itself out as we go into the future. But you are right to say we need to maybe start living within our means on the continent, and try by all means to avoid what they've been described here as modern day mashonisas, to say don't go there because they're loan sharks, typically, because the money will have to be paid back one way or the other. Hence, some of these conditions will need to be clear, and you're right to say maybe if it needs to be debated in Parliament to say how do we cap it, then we need to create somewhat of a cap here. And Tete Jabu, you're calling us from Mamelodi. Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Katlego, and good morning to your guest.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katlego. Katlego, the first thing that comes into my mind when we discuss the problems of Africa, the biggest one that actually that I see is unity. There's no African unity that you can talk about, because actually we are actually going different directions when we do things. And if you talk about an enemy can attack you very easy if you are not united. And that is why you get a man like Donald Trump doing what he's doing to Africa and South Africa. You get China doing what he's doing in the name of BRICS to South Africa. Everyone just wants to come in Africa because they are using, especially South Africa is being used as a conduit for them to access Africa, so that we don't even see the bargaining power that we have as a continent. And I guess it's right that we must stop borrowing, because this borrowing, the very same money that they borrow from various financial institutions of the world, they loot that money because that money does not serve the right purpose. You find that they borrow money and that money needs to be paid back, but yet the money actually, it is not actually performing its intended purpose. That is where the problem comes. We have proved it again and again during COVID-19. What happened to the money that we got to address the problems of COVID-19?
It disappeared.
You'll be my guest on that one.
It disappeared.
Yeah, so that is a problem of Africa. So this thing of misinterpreting this looting, looter continue, as one of your analysts have said, it must stop. It must definitely stop. We must stop borrowing money in order to come and please a certain group of people. And then the other thing that I think actually it will help us and elevate us to significance is that we must start looking ourselves in the mirror, and start adding value to ourselves, so that actually we don't run after people. People must run after us. Yeah, because we are an inferior continent. Yeah. And it's not a secret that we are an inferior continent. And that is why actually we have got a bankruptcy of leadership. You get a man like Donald Trump who's a bully, doing what he's doing. I'm happy he's doing what he's doing, Donald Trump. I don't like him, but I'm happy with what he's doing, because he's opening our eyes that, guys, you must look yourself in the mirror. Yeah, we must do what we can, and we are capable of doing something better for ourselves as a continent and as separate countries. It doesn't mean that actually if we do something for ourselves, we won't be appealing to people. We will be very attractive. You know, for you to be for somebody to be superior like Donald Trump is because somebody is inferior. And nobody will be superior if there's nobody who is inferior. No?
Yeah,
so
no.
I think that is where the problem comes. And I'll just end there, Katlego,
Yeah.
for today. And thank you very much.
Yeah, I really appreciate you giving us your time this morning. And Tade Jabu calling there from Mamelodi, saying government really, when they borrow this money, it becomes a problem when we don't understand where they go and we don't get to see their impact here. He gave us an example of this money, COVID-19 money that came into South Africa. Even to date, we don't know what happened here. So it does become a cause for concern. Elvis, we're out of time. Let's get your parting shots, but also give us a sense of how do we follow your work as well.
Yes, thanks, Katlego. So I think my closing statement, Katlego, is that, but before that, I would want to agree with the caller to say we are lacking this united voice as Africans. We are lacking this unity. That's why you see when Trump is putting now what he's doing by, exerting tariffs, we have seen the European Union coming together as a bloc and respond to these tariffs. But as Africans, we have seen, President Mnangagwa in Zimbabwe responding on his own. President Cyril Ramaphosa is yet to do that. All those Africans, we lack that united voice as Africans to respond to these things. And yes, going back to our discussion, Africa's debt and current troubles, are partly driven by, global factors. But we cannot ignore the homegrown storms of corruption and poor governance. If we fix how we manage public money, strengthen our institutions, and hold leaders accountable, our currency will stabilize, debt will become a tool for growth, and ordinary Africans will finally feel the benefits of our natural and human world. We cannot keep borrowing our way out of problems created by bad government. It's time to break the cycle, and the solution starts with us.
How do we follow your work, Elvis? Who are you on social media?
Yes, thank you, Katlego. I'm available on X. That's formerly Twitter at Honorable Elvis Mungari, and then also on Facebook, Elvis Mungari. We can have other candid conversations on those platforms.
Awesome. Elvis, thank you very much, man, for coming through, for giving us your insights, your wisdoms, where some of these developments are concerned. But indeed, we are hoping that in years to come, some of these issues on the continent would be a thing of the past. If you're saying that Kenya is able to do it, then we can follow suit as well and start being united, but championing, governance, transparent governance here that won't leave us compromised. Thank you very much for coming through, Elvis. Enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend.
Most welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome, man. Elvis Mungari coming through here as our guest, an Afro-Expert, and just helping us make sense of some of these issues that we're navigating on the continent. This morning, putting under the spotlight the issue of our debt crisis, but also the currency devaluation in Africa, and how then some of these issues then would find ourselves compromised as emerging economies, and where lie the solution in some of these issues. I want us to break a bit. I see Sia is on standby. We're going to get candid this morning with Sia Bonga. Lion Dlamini is coming through as a gospel artist, and this is where then we'll be getting candid, getting to know his music some more. At the same time, just him helping us to wrap up the show as it takes us to the top of 3. I want us to break into his song.